Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. The Fuji Frontier SP3000 and SP500 film scanners are two of the workhorses of the film photography industry. They've been a staple of commercial film labs ever since their release in the late 90s, and they're still highly sought after for a number of reasons. I bought an SP3000 last year and it's been an absolute dream to use. But as film continues to kind of make its comeback, we keep seeing new and innovative products being released, especially in the world of film scanning or digitizing using a digital camera. And this most recent one that I tested right here is kind of one of the most interesting. This is the 135 Autocarrier by Filmomat, and this is inspired by the Fuji Frontier and really aims to bring some of that kind of speed and automation to the world of camera scanning. And I've had this here for the last couple of weeks and spent some time testing it, also using a couple of other accessories from Filmomat that kind of round out the pseudo Frontier experience. And I wanted to make this video just to show you how this works, share my experience with it, talk about some things I liked, and also some improvements that I think could be made. And also just want to note this video is not sponsored by Filmomat. So the 135 Autocarrier is a system for automated film scanning, and it's made in partnership by Filmomat, and I believe it's pronounced Bobach. And Filmomat makes all sorts of different tools and software for film photography, and Bobach actually specializes in making masks and accessories for Fuji Frontier scanners. I have a couple of their parts for mine. And I have to say, you know, the quality of this, when you see it, the build quality and also in usage, they've done a really nice job. And how this works is it connects your camera and you simply just feed a roll of film in, it grabs it, and then it automatically sends the entire roll through, stopping at each individual frame automatically, where the pressure plate is then activated and presses down to hold the film. And then the camera's triggered and it advances to the next. So the Autocarrier by itself, you know, it's a nice tool for simplifying and automating the process. But like I said, there's a couple of other tools and accessories from Filmomat that you combine together to give you that full Frontier experience from a workflow standpoint. So if you're unfamiliar with how a Frontier scanner works with 35mm film, they have what's called an Autocarrier. And what you do is you just take your film, you feed it into the Autocarrier, it takes it just like the Filmomat product, and it runs the entire roll through, capturing every single frame automatically. And it does this very quick. But what it also does is, while it's capturing the frames, it's converting them at the same time. So once the entire roll of film's gone through and it's done its pre-scan, you sit there afterwards and you use the keyboard on the Frontier to actually go and make your density and color adjustments, and then you export everything all at once. So this is such a nice workflow just because the capture and the conversion are happening at the same time, and it just makes things really quick and quite convenient as well. So the Autocarrier comes with the unit here itself, which has a built-in light. It also has the pressure plate, and then it comes with this control panel here. And on here, you have a switch to turn the light on and off. You have this switch here to choose manual, semi-automatic, or automatic. You have another switch to activate the pressure plate for fine focusing, which I'll show you after. Speed control, your knob here for manual advance, and then you have your button here to trigger the camera. And what you do is you connect this to the Autocarrier, and then your camera connects to the Autocarrier using a remote cable. That's what triggers it. I was using my Lumix S5 2X, which is what I use for camera scanning, but I also use it for filming, so that's why it's not set up here right now. But I did grab another camera to film a bunch of B-roll, so you will see this in action with the entire process. So the first mode is the fully manual mode. You flip on your light, grab your film, feed it in a bit, and then you use this advanced dial here to feed your film through and line up your first frame. And like I said, when the camera is capturing each frame, it's activating a pressure plate. So what you have to do before you actually go and start scanning is you flip this switch here, which activates the pressure plate, so then you can go and set your critical focus, just because when the pressure plate activates, it obviously changes where the film is. So you flip this on, set your focus, flip it off, and you're good to go. And then you just simply go ahead and you capture each frame using this trigger button here, and you'd advance to the next. And yeah, the responsiveness of this dial, how well it works, same with the trigger, it's really nice. They've done a great job. But this is probably the mode that I would use the least, just because it's really not any different than other products that are out there right now when it comes to manually advancing your film. So the next mode to look at is the fully automatic mode. And this is obviously, you know, the big selling feature, the big draw. to the Autocarrier. And what you do with this is you simply just take your film, you start to feed it in, and then the Autocarrier grabs it automatically and it feeds the entire roll of film through, stopping automatically at each frame and triggering the camera automatically. So this is exactly like the Frontier with its Autocarrier, and like I said, a big draw for this. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get consistent results with any of the film that I ran through. So with every single roll, there was either, say, like 1 to 3 frames that would be off, where the camera would mess up a little bit or the sensor would mess up. And I actually reached out to Lucas from Filmomat and asked him about this, and he said what can happen is the way this works is the sensors are looking for the kind of bright vertical areas in between frames. That's how it's calculating where to stop. And if you have a frame that, say, has a bright vertical line in it, maybe like a power pole or something, a dark shadow area, or what would be a shadow after conversion, it can throw this off and it can think that that's actually a frame edge. So this did happen to me, like I said, maybe 1 to 3 frames per roll. But interesting enough, there is one more mode, which is called semi-automatic. And in a way, this is almost a solution to that problem and the one that I would use the most. We'll take a look at this one up next, but first just have to quickly talk about the sponsor today, which is Squarespace. So as a photographer, Squarespace has been such a helpful tool over the years. It gives me a way to make a nice professional looking website and keep it up to date very easily. For example, they have things like their blueprint builder, which lets you build your site from scratch, but also gives you helpful tools like different layout options or font pairings and color palettes. But then also just things like adding a gallery or updating one. You can click and drag to rearrange and reorder images to play with sequencing. And they also have great tools if you want to sell your work. I recently redid my print store, and Squarespace made the entire process very simple, from product listing to receiving payments and also fulfilling orders. So check out squarespace.com today, sign up for a free trial, test it out. When you're ready to launch, you can use my link below to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. So the last mode is this semi-automatic mode, and what you do is you feed in your film, you manually advance to the first frame, trigger it, and then you manually advance to the second frame and trigger it again. And then afterwards, what the Autocarrier does is it takes that spacing information that you just gave it, and it uses that in combination with the sensor to then advance to the next frame automatically. So every time you trigger the camera, it'll then advance to the next frame by itself. But you can also hold this down for a few seconds, and when you do that, it'll then go into an auto mode where it's advancing and triggering by itself. But it's using both of those kind of inputs, the sensor and the spacing information, to determine where the next frame is. And using this method, I was able to get through rolls with 0 issues at all. It worked really great for me, and it eliminated any of those problems where this was getting thrown off. So in a way, for me, that is the automatic mode, because it still is automatic. It just needs that little bit of user input at the start to help set things up. All right, so next up, I want to talk about a couple of different ways you can use this. It makes the most sense, in my opinion, to run with this tethered, so the images are going straight to your computer. And the first way that I did this is I tethered my Panasonic S5 IIX to my computer, and then I had the raw files being imported automatically into Lightroom. But obviously from there, I had to go and then open up Negative Lab Pro and then go convert them afterwards and do my adjustments. So there was still a little bit of a slowdown in the process using that method. But the second process and way of using this is with a couple of accessories, like I said, that Filmomat's made. And with this setup, it does an incredible job at mimicking kind of the entire Frontier workflow. So first, they have their own conversion software, which is called Smart Convert. I reviewed this on the channel a few years ago. And they also have their Smart Convert control panel. So both the software and the control panel mimic the controls that you get on the Frontier. So you have density adjustment, then you have your plus minus for color adjustments, and then you also have contrast and saturation, which aren't specifically on the Frontier's keypad, and then you can rotate and crop and a few other things. But what you do with this is you still have your camera tethered, you open up Smart Convert, and then you have it set so as the images are being captured, they're importing automatically to Smart Convert, and it's converting them on the fly as well. So exactly like with the Frontier, you run your roll of film through, it's capturing and converting the images, and then you sit there afterwards with your keyboard or keypad, and you make your slight color adjustments and export. So yeah, this is a pretty cool setup, and like I said, it does a really great job at giving you kind of that Frontier workflow and experience. But I think it's worth talking about what also makes a Frontier great, because really the workflow is only one part of the process. And with the Frontier, one of its kind of big standouts or selling points is how well it does its conversion process, specifically when it comes to color and contrast. And, using a digital camera to digitize or scan your film, it does give you a file that has a little bit more, say, like latitude or flexibility. The Frontier is notoriously contrasty, especially with smaller negatives like 35 millimeter. But the way that it handles that contrast and the color afterwards really is special and is unmatched, in my opinion. It has kind of a signature look to it. And even though, conversion softwares and products are getting much better, I'm quite happy with Smart Convert. I think it does a good job. Negative Lab Pro as well. They still aren't, on the same level. And that's just because there's more to it as well. It's not just the software. The Frontier uses individual RGB lights to make its adjustments, and also a black and white CCD sensor. So yeah, it goes beyond just conversion software. And that is one area where these old commercial lab scanners like the Frontier still have an advantage. But the second thing, and this could potentially be a big one, is just when it comes to dust and scratch control. So obviously with, camera scanning, there's no digital ice or no dust and scratch removal. And this has never been a big deal for me, just because I'm only doing my own work. And even though it's a pain in the ass, afterwards I'll go and just clone out any dust and scratch and things like that. But if you are buying something like this to do volume, then you might get into a situation where the time you're saving from the speed and automation of this is just going back into dust removal afterwards. And, that's one area where something like the Frontier still has an advantage. The dust control in that, I've always just left set on low, and I don't think I've touched a single scan coming out of it. It works that well. So this is one area where I'll be curious to see what improvements can be made in the future. Obviously, there's ways to minimize dust, and there's different tools available already, but I think that is one area where maybe there's some software technology or other products that could help with it when you're using a digital camera. Okay, so a bit of an abrupt change in scene here. I actually had finished this video. This is a few days later, had it exported, and got an email from Lucas at Filmomat. And funny enough, he told me that he just released a firmware update, which greatly improves the automatic mode. So what you do is you insert your film, it advances automatically to the first frame. You make tweaks to how it's lined up if you need to, and then you hit the trigger button and it goes through the whole roll automatically using that spacing and also the frame detection. And according to Lucas, I haven't had a chance to update or test it, but he said this eliminates any of those kind of missed detections or false frames that I experienced, which makes sense because the semi-auto mode, like I said when I used it, worked great. So yeah, cool to see this updated so quick, and basically eliminates my first improvement point. But there is one more thing. We'll jump back to the original video. But the second thing is, I just noticed when I was using this, some light fall off or vignetting on the edges of the light source with the frames that were coming in. And at first I thought this might have just been an issue with my lens. I'm using a Sigma macro 70mm art lens, but I never noticed any problems before using that. So what I did is I went and scanned the same roll of film using my Cinestill CS Lite, which is what I use all the time. And those frames that I captured didn't have that vignetting, or it was a lot less in them. So a little bit of fall off with the light source that I noticed. I would like to see that refined as well. Smart Convert does have a flat field correction built into it, where you take a picture of the light source before you put your film in, and then you can load that in and it'll help correct for fall off. I tried that and I didn't see a huge improvement. So yeah, any way to refine the light source for a little more evenness, I think would be helpful as well. But yeah, overall, really cool product that actually did a great job recreating the Frontier workflow experience, but obviously you still miss out on that amazing color, and then also just lacking some kind of key features if you did want to use this in a lab style environment, specifically the dust and scratch removal. But with those old commercial lab scanners, they're obviously hard to find. They're also very finicky. They're fairly expensive and they take up a ton of space. So something like this is more accessible and a little more user-friendly from a space standpoint. But this still is an investment. You know, the Autocarrier is not cheap. So I would say this is obviously for someone who doesn't mind paying a premium for their own setup, or obviously someone who wants to make the investment if they need a tool that can help them start to do like automation and speed if they're doing volume. So anyways, yeah, fun one to test. Hope you enjoyed this look at the 135 Autocarrier, and that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.